Meet the Robshaws. Brandon, Rochelle, Miranda, Roz and Fred.
Let's go!
For one summer, this food-loving family is embarking on an extraordinary time-travelling adventure to discover how a post-war revolution in what we eat has transformed the way we live.
That is just amazing. Look at them.
Britain has gone from meagre rations to ready meals at the touch of a button in just 50 years. But how has this changed our health, our homes,
We've got to pull out harder!
and our family dynamics?
Can't do it anymore. This is what would make a woman break.
To find out, the Robshaws are going to shop, cook and eat their way through history.
It's 1974. Whoa! I think that is enough sugar now, though.
No, I haven't got hardly anyone.
Starting in 1950, their own home will be their time machine.
Oh my goodness!
Well, this carpet hurts my eyes. Who designed that?
Someone who was colourblind.
Fast-forwarding them through a new year each day, as they experience firsthand the culinary fads, fashions and gadgets of each age.
Catch.
Whoa!
This week, it's back to the austerity of the 1950s.
What is it?
It's liver.
We've just eaten the grimmest meal I think I'll ever eat.
As they discover how our changing relationship with food has shaped all of our lives.
I'm just sitting here on my own. You know, it makes me feel like a bit of an outcast.
Sweets are off ration. Yes. Yes.
On an ordinary British street, an extraordinary experiment is about to take place. The Robshaw family have agreed to give up their modern diet and spend the next 6 weeks eating only the food of the past, starting in 1950. But it's not just the meals that will be different. The entire ground floor of their own house is being ripped apart and remodelled to reflect the average family home of the era. Their modern extension has been blocked off, leaving a kitchen half the size, too small for a dining table. There was no open-plan living in the 50s. Instead, the double reception has been divided into a cosy sitting room and a formal dining room. I'll be running the family's time-travelling adventure with the help of food historian Polly Russell. This is a very ambitious experiment. The way we eat has changed out of all recognition in recent living memory. So by fast-forwarding the Robshaws through 50 years of history in a matter of weeks, we should get a very dramatic sense of how the way that we eat has changed and the way that it's affected every aspect of daily life. But now it's back to basics in 1950, the year George Orwell died, Princess Anne was born, and Attlee beat Churchill to win a second term in government. Polly and I are taken aback by just how basic it is. Gosh, it's very low-tech.
It's sort of like camping indoors. Everything is being done by hand. There's nothing saving you labour. It's a very basic kitchen in terms of equipment.
So what's like the biggest shock that Rochelle is going to have?
First of all, it's the amount of time she's going to be spending working. And I think the second thing will be, in here, there's no fridge. In 1950, only 3% of the population had a fridge. Instead, the family will have to rely on the larder to keep things fresh. The Robshaws have signed up to eat only the food available at the time, which in 1950 means hardly anything. Well, so that is the proverbial cupboard that was bare. Yep, it really is quite spare. Very little relative to what we're used to now. And with a marble shelf here, which helps to keep things cool.
Does it really? Does it work?
Well, it does work, and you're buying food regularly. You're buying food on a daily basis. And what you also see is that there's no surplus money being spent on snacks, on the sort of treats that we're used to. And it's not somewhere where you would come to graze.
No, lard or an onion or something is not what the kids want when they come home from school. In the 21st century, lecturer Brandon, teacher Rochelle and their 3 children enjoy eating everything from sushi to super noodles. But it's time to leave their modern habits behind and step back in time.
Older people that I've met have said that the 50s was better, that they had a good time, that the food was good, and I'm curious really to find out if it was true.
I'm most looking forward to knowing what my dad would have had to do, or my grandma.
I think it'd be a great experience for the whole family. I often tell my kids about the olden days and what it was like growing up back then, and I would just love them to live through it with me.
My dad does most of the cooking. I think that my mum would find stuff like the cooking tricky. She might get a bit stressed.
I don't know how well I would cope, so that does fill me with a certain degree of apprehension.
This is the family's first glimpse of their remodelled home.
Oh, wow. Look at this!
Oh, here's where we eat.
Okay, this is so cool.
This is so amazing.
So this is where we will eat. I think we're going to really enjoy it, actually.
Look at this.
We haven't got a television in
Oh
here.
my God, no TV.
Never mind, we can look at the handy reckoner.
But the biggest change is in the kitchen.
Oh, my...
Oh my goodness!
I did not expect this.
It's astounding. It's just a completely different atmosphere, isn't it? It seems so kind of bare and stark.
I'm surprised that it is as basic as it is.
It feels like a real sort of utility room. It's not a sort of room you'd kind of hang around in, is it?
No,
Wouldn't eat in
I'm not
it.
hanging around in it.
I think you'll find you are, actually.
Where's the fridge?
That is the fridge.
A larder with pork dripping.
Yeah, that is dripping. We'll have that in the morning. Well, actually, there's not much else to have, is there?
That really isn't much, is it? I've got no idea what we're going to eat tonight. I think we'll have to go and get pizza.
Hello. Wow.
Hi.
Luckily, I've brought them a survival guide to life in the 1950s.
So this is your 1950s manual, your guide to how to live in the 1950s. There's a guide to your roles, the things you're going to be able to do. You can imagine if you wind the clock back to a less enlightened time, you'll just go to work and come back and want to know what's on the table. And you'll have cooked it, and you'll be serving it. And there's no real getting around from that. The war was over, the women came back from all the important work they'd been done and straight back in the kitchen.
Right.
There was a thing called the National Food Survey, and it records the exact meals that people actually ate in the 1950s, and you'll be replicating them. What they really were eating was suet puddings, a lot of potatoes from yesterday, for example, bread and dripping, boiled things.
Established by the government in 1940, the National Food Survey recorded what 8,000 families ate for breakfast, lunch and dinner for 1 week every year. The survey continued until 2000, and the meticulously kept diaries of housewives provide a remarkable window into the changing diets of ordinary families over the decades. It will guide what the Robshaws eat for the next 50 years.
You've got no fridge, you've got no microwave, you haven't got much of an oven. It's quite daunting in many ways, quite brave of you.
Right, yeah. No, it looks like something I probably won't be able to manage.
Any regrets?
Yes, loads, yes.
Well, don't bring them to me. I absolutely can't help you with them. I can give you the manual.
Right, OK, thank you.
Good luck in the 1950s.
Right, thank you very much.
I hope you survive.
Thank you. I don't know if the word is like overawed, underawed. I can't work out what part of awed I'm at. I feel sort of actually quite nervous because it's the sort of the thought of the limitation of food. So I'm feeling a little bit anxious.
The reality of life in 1950 is beginning to sink in. 5 years after the end of the Second World War, food was still rationed. Cheap food imports that had kept the nation going during wartime had ended, and our post-war agreement to send crops to the starving population of Europe meant supplies of many foods remained under government control.
It's far worse now than it was during the war, and if we get much less, there'll be none at all.
To ease Rochelle in gently to austerity cooking, she's making a simple National Food Survey tea that a 35-year-old housewife made for her tailor husband and 2 teenage sons in 1950.
National bread, dripping, pilchards, tomatoes, potatoes, tea, milk and sugar.
Ooh, gosh, it looks like honey.
Dripping, the fat saved after roasting meat, was a free, flavoursome alternative to rationed butter.
I think if people had to eat this every day, it might be pretty tough. But a lot of people did, and a lot of people enjoyed it. It's a bit unusual for us, because we don't have it. I'm going to try and open the pilchards. This is going to be a problem. I've got no idea how to work it.
The government subsidised the canning of pilchards, a mature sardine, to make the country less dependent on imports, and they appear as a regular feature of families' diets under rationing.
No. Do you think you stab it in? How did they do it? There must be a knack. Oh dear, I've made a hole in it. I don't know what. I'm going to hyperventilate. We'll all be starving to death and there'll be an unopened tin of pilchards found on the table.
The National Food Survey records that many families supplemented their rationed diet with fruit and vegetables they'd grown themselves, a habit adopted during the war. So Brandon and 10-year-old Fred have come to the allotment I've arranged for the family.
Loads here.
Aren't they beautiful? This is the treasures of the earth. In the supermarkets, it always says like new potatoes, but these are really new.
Yeah.
We could be eating these the same day we dug them up. Can you get your shears right round that, the green bit at the end? Not my finger.
Catch.
Whoa! That is one big marrow, isn't it? Isn't that fantastic?
In the 21st century, Brandon does the lion's share of the cooking at home. But following the rules of the experiment means he's exempt from kitchen duties.
I think it will be a bit frustrating to not be allowed in the kitchen. Not even allowed in the kitchen, that seems a bit extreme to me. But, having said that, if this is what I get to do as an alternative, if I get to come to an allotment and dig and get fresh vegetables out of the ground and then take them home, I think there's something quite fulfilling about that.
Back in the kitchen, Rochelle is still battling with ancient gadgets and calls for reinforcements from youngest daughter Ros.
See these pilchards? I can't open the tin, Ros.
What makes you think I'd be able to open
I
it?
think you've got that sort of brain.
I have no idea what this is.
It's a tin opener.
I don't know how to open a normal tin. I'm really sorry.
I'll buy you something if it wasn't austerity years. That can't possibly pierce the tin. It must go round the edge, but I don't know how to...
I have not. You're better off asking Miranda.
Hello. Can you help with the pilchards? I've managed to make a hole, but I can't get anything out.
Do you know how to do it?
No, if I knew how to do it, I wouldn't ask you, would I?
Oh, God.
I don't think we can have the pilchards tonight.
Brandon and Fred are back from the allotment, eager for their first 50s tea.
That is so wonderful. I can't tell you how happy I am to see these.
Yeah.
If you can open the pilchards, Brandon, because I'm having a bit of a problem with them.
All right, I'll have a go. From what I remember...
Be careful, be careful.
So be careful. I think just try and work it all the way round.
Really?
Cutting as you go.
Oh.
Oh, we're not doing that well, are we?
Oh, you're going round over the top, Brandon.
Well, I'm doing it in a slightly irregular manner, yeah. Whoever designed this bloody tin opener, it's like the worst bit of design. That's probably open enough that you can kind of dig it out now, can't you, with a spoon?
Do you think that's how they did it?
Yes, I do.
I just feel cross that I was defeated by a can opener. And I haven't even made a cup of tea yet.
Ugh.
Shall I talk you around the bread plate?
Yes, please.
This is bread and butter.
Yes.
This is bread and dripping.
Yes.
This is bread and pilchard.
I'm not looking forward to it.
Fred, have you tried the bread and dripping?
No.
I think you should.
No!
Look, in the 50s, they had to just eat what was there. Try it. Well?
Ugh.
You don't like that? OK.
Just like salty, weird jelly spread on weird bread.
It's a good job we got these tomatoes, actually, because otherwise there'd be nothing that was kind of fresh or colourful.
No.
If you've been out working all day, this just doesn't seem... not quite enough, not quite kind of fortifying enough.
I'm actually still hungry after dinner. I ate like potatoes and bread. It sounds quite filling, but it really wasn't because it's bread and potatoes, and I don't really want to eat that.
I would rather starve than eat rationed food.
It really was quite austere and pretty sort of basic, really. You can imagine after going through the war and then suddenly finding your condition has not improved one bit. I'm surprised there wasn't a revolution.
In this experiment, each new day heralds a new year. So for the Robshaws, it's 1951. Usually, Brandon would make the kids' breakfast, but it's Rochelle's duty now.
It'll probably be 1954 by the time this boils.
She's making the same breakfast as a 45-year-old housewife made for her decorator husband and 4 children.
Weetabix, toast and dripping, tea, milk and sugar.
In 1951, the majority of households were eating the subsidised national wheatmeal loaf. Introduced during the war to stretch Britain's limited wheat supplies, the bread used flour made from the whole grain, including the husks, and was fortified with extra vitamins. With a portion of our wheat crop now being sent to Germany, the gritty and rather indigestible loaf again became a staple of the British diet.
Honestly, I'm beginning to dread each new day. Just when we're getting used to a bit of white bread, back we have to go to wartime loaves.
It's taken a bit of a while. Compared to a toaster, it'll probably be done by now.
Thank you.
Well, that's not all yours, just take a bit.
It's making me so sick.
The thing about the national bread is, though, that it's quite filling, isn't it? It is hard work to eat. And you get a bit fed up with it, don't you?
Imagine having that every day.
This is going to sound a bit pretentious, but in Henry V, there's a bit where he talks about somebody going to bed crammed with distressful bread. And I kind of know what he meant. That's how I feel, yeah, I'm crammed with distressful bread. And I know we're not supposed to waste food, but I'm quite happy to waste that. Bye, Rochelle.
Bye, Brandon. Work hard.
I'll try.
Usually, Rochelle would be heading out to work with the rest of the family.
Nice day. Bye. Getting a bit sad. Go back to an empty house.
But as a 1950s housewife, she's got a full-time job at home, when domestic chores took an average 75 hours a week, compared to just 18 hours today.
There's nobody to talk to, and it does feel slightly trapping for me. But that is, for many women, how it would have been. It must have been extremely frustrating for women who had been at work during the war. I think it's OK if you don't know you're trapped and you've always lived that life, but if you have tasted that freedom of being out with other women and working, it must have been quite hard.
But there's no time for Rochelle to dwell. With no fridge, she needs to shop every day. Rather than the 25,000 products stocked by the average modern supermarket today, her choice is severely limited. And food is expensive. In 1951, British families spent on average an astonishing 1/3 of their income on food, compared to as little as 12% today.
That's a ration for the week.
Oh, gosh, that's for the week?
Yeah.
Although the war has now been over for 6 years, meat, eggs, butter, cooking fat, sugar, tea and sweets are still all on ration.
So that's just one egg for 5 people. Wow.
And things are about to take a turn for the worse.
It's a double problem today for the butcher and the housewife. Not much meat, and much of what there is makes the butcher blush.
That's your ration for the week. There's no more.
That's the same.
That's the lot.
What am I supposed to do with that?
In 1951, Britain refused to pay higher prices to its main meat supplier, Argentina, so the meat ration hit an all-time low of 5 ounces per person per week.
One little bit of steak on Friday, and blimey, we've had it for the rest of the week then. What does a man live on? 11 of meat? Disgusting.
I've come for my liver.
So it's 5 ounces per person. Shall I cut you 5 ounces?
Yeah,
so
let me see what that looks like.
No problem.
Yeah. And you don't do anything on the black market, do you?
No.
No. Let's try and get a little bit more.
The individual meat ration was the equivalent of just over 1/4 pound burger a week.
And there you go. There's your 5 ounces.
Right, that's quite small, isn't it?
Most families ate their main meal, dinner, in the middle of the day, and Rochelle now needs to prepare Brandon's. She's making a meal first made by a 45-year-old housewife for her train conductor husband.
Fried liver, onions, potatoes, cauliflower, national loaf, dripping.
Experienced housewives would spread their ration through the week, but novice Rochelle has bought the family's entire meat ration in one go. Concerned about keeping it fresh, she's cooking it all at once.
Cut so thin. I don't want it to be like a bit of shoe leather.
In 1951, 60% of men came home for their midday meal. So Brandon's doing the same.
Oh, God, I'm starving. What have we got?
We've got liver and potatoes.
All right. I have to check myself not to go into the kitchen. Normally, it would automatically be the first place I would go to. And now I find myself sitting in this quiet little room waiting for somebody to bring me a meal. It's a completely different experience. Maybe I'll get used to it, but at the moment it feels a little strange. Oh, good, thank you. Do I need to ask what this is?
You're getting grumpy.
It's just, I'm sorry, it's just this national bread. I can't face it anymore. You know the sort of feeling you get when you just know that your body doesn't want any more of a particular kind of food? That's what I've got here. So these are really quite small, thin slices, actually, of liver.
But they're eating the week's ration.
A week's ration?
Yes. So you wouldn't get any more meat after that.
Well, it's not really enough, is it? Well, I suppose the thing about it is there's no kind of zing or kick, there's no kind of herbs or spices. So it was kind of bland.
Right. To be told that it's bland and boring felt like a bit of a stab in my heart. OK.
The National Food Survey shows that Rochelle's frustrations with rationing were shared by thousands of women. The 44-year-old wife of an ironmonger commented,
"A little more butter and meat would make such a difference. A hungry man is an angry man."
And then he's gone off to work, so it kind of feels, whew, you know, what am I going to do now? I'll wash up and then make another bland meal.
But there's a good excuse to splash out. It's Roz's 15th birthday, and Rochelle's using the week's sugar ration to make a pink layer party cake with dried eggs.
Never cooked with dried eggs before. It's really odd. How can that be an egg? Bran's got absolutely no idea what it's like to be in the kitchen for the whole day. It's a bit soft in the middle, but perhaps we can just eat up to the middle and then leave the rest.
The cake is filled with jam and topped with icing, made with blancmange powder to save on sugar.
It's too runny to go through a piping thing. I just drip it over the top. I wanted to try and ice her name in it, but that's not really happened.
Birthday girl Roz, Fred and Miranda are back from school.
As soon as I get home, I'd usually have something to eat. And I'm actually really, really hungry.
I'm missing crisps, chocolate, sweets, ice cream. Just everything nice.
Flavoured crisps haven't been invented yet, so for Roz's birthday meal, they'll be eating Brandon's leftovers. With food in such short supply, not a crumb was to be wasted.
So they're going to have some of this cold liver, which I have to say really doesn't look terribly appetising. It's gone a bit green.
Hello.
Here's your supper.
What is it?
This is the leftovers from Dad's meal. It's liver.
Ugh.
No?
It's got blood in it.
You can just try a little bit. What do you think?
Weird, isn't it?
It's disgusting.
But what part of it's disgusting?
All of it. The bread made me feel sick all day today. Literally, I didn't feel good all
Really?
day today.
Oh, just eat the cauliflower then.
It's cold.
They really didn't like it. I mean, what was it? Potatoes, cauliflower and bits of liver. All cold. What's not to like? You know. But we'll see what happens with this cake.
What's that?
That is really nice. It's actually really nice. It's icing.
We've just eaten one of the grimmest meals I think I'll ever eat in my life. And I felt really sorry for Roz. It's been the worst birthday in the world.
Happy birthday to you.
My birthday really wasn't very good. I didn't actually eat any supper because it wasn't very nice. I'm sorry, but you think about it, the liver is the bit of your body that processes all the things that your body doesn't want. So why would you eat that?
Hello, I'm back.
London, hi.
The food survey shows that many children ate tea with their mothers, while their fathers ate later, undisturbed.
One of the drawbacks to being served in this way is that you kind of feel almost that you're not really part of the family. I missed out on Rosalind's birthday tea today. Now they've all gone off and are busy doing other things, and I'm just sitting here on my own, eating in this empty room. You know, it makes me feel like a bit of an outcast almost.
The mood within the family seemed to really dip. Those austerity years were extremely difficult. Having to sort of keep going and make the best of things must have shown an enormous strength of resolve.
Housewives like Rochelle may have struggled to feed their families at home, but the government was doing its best to ensure children had enough to eat through the compulsory supply of school dinners. By 1952, 50% of children were eating their main meal of the day at school. Polly and I have asked Fred's school to prepare a dinner for his class, 1950s style.
Obviously, they weren't eating burgers and chips and turkey Twizzlers, so what dismal 1950s stuff was on the plate?
Well, I think when you read the menus, they don't read as being grey and dismal. They seem quite meat-heavy from our perspective. A lot of roasts, boiled meat, pies, quite a lot of offal, so heart, liver, kidneys. There's always an emphasis on the protein.
So could the schools cook whatever they want?
No, schools were given quite strict directives from their local authorities about what they could and couldn't cook. So they had to provide 20 grams of protein a day, and they even specify 400 milligrams of calcium in recognition of a nation that's historically had terrible teeth, rickets, stunted growth. So this project is really about building the health and the strength of the future generation.
It all sounds very municipal and centralised. It seems a bit over-controlling, doesn't it?
Well, it comes out of the idea of the state looking after the people, the country, the nation, and also that rationing sort of worked, that it equalled out inequalities in diet and health. And so there was this imperative to continue that through the state feeding of children.
We'll see how these pampered 21st century school kids get on with real cooking.
Exactly.
Ring, ring goes the bell. We're serving up for Fred's class the classic mince and dried peas, potatoes and boiled cabbage.
Right, children, your 1950s lunch is ready. Don't all hurry at once.
It smells like sick, it looks horrible.
Come on, it's good for you. Do you want
Nice
gravy?
big helping.
What do you think of the food, then?
Not nice. Disgusting. This food isn't very nice, but this is probably a tiny bit better than my mum's.
There's not much flavour in it, and it's just plain.
Do you think this food is more or less healthy than the food that you eat?
I think it was healthy, but not very nice.
They might have turned their noses up at the grub, but a combination of rationing and strict controls on school meals meant that in the 50s the diets of children were healthier than at any other point in our time-travelling experiment. They all ate it, and even the ones who went, yuck, actually ate it. They all finished their food. So either these are very well brought up children, or the 1950s really had something right about feeding kids.
A woman's touch.
Although there was equality in what children ate at school in 1952, the subjects taught were rather less even-handed.
Get some elbow grease into it.
I've arranged for housekeeper Vanessa Littlejohn to give Miranda and Roz instruction in housecraft, part of every schoolgirl's timetable.
The kind of hocus pocus.
It's vital, as young ladies who hopefully will get married one day, to be a very good housewife, and housecraft is one of the most vital bits of education a young lady will ever get.
There were fears that after 5 years of war, with men away and women working outside the home, the tradition of mothers passing on knowledge of how to run a home to their daughters was disappearing.
Every branch of homemaking is taught. In the kitchens, they learn simple cooking. And in the laundry, the children are taught to wash and iron exactly as they'll have to when they're grown up.
So little effort there, young lady.
Miranda and Roz both planned to go to university, but the chances of their doing that in 1952 were less than 1%. Those that could afford to were expected to give up work on marriage and become dependent housewives.
Throughout the day you would be cleaning, shopping, laundry. You wouldn't have had time for a job. Being a housewife was a full-time job. Try not to bash the furniture.
I hate the way that my future's being mapped out to be a good housewife. I just find it extremely boring, and I don't think I'd be a very good one at all. So I'd have to do something I wasn't very good at and I didn't like my whole life, and I wouldn't even get paid for it.
Into the city of London winds the procession of heralds to proclaim within her ancient walls the coronation of our Queen.
In 1953, the nation was given a public holiday to celebrate the coronation of Elizabeth II. To mark the occasion, households were given extra rations of margarine and sugar.
Look at all this sugar.
Got some supplies.
Oh my goodness me, look at that.
I want the family to put theirs to good use.
You'll have guests arriving at 4.
Oh. Well, I think you might have to get cooking, darling.
Magazines were crammed full of tips on how to make perfect coronation displays.
Got to make a crown. If I put it on a scale of whether I could recreate this, I'd say probably 1.
Without a fridge, setting the jelly for the crown's centre is going to be impossible. So Rochelle has hit upon a solution shared by many 50s housewives.
My plan is to see if there's anybody in the street who will let me set my jelly in their fridge. Hi. Do you mind if I use your fridge just to pop that in, to set?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Come on through.
A fridge cost around 11 times the average weekly wage, the equivalent of over £4,500 today. So it would be a popular neighbour that had one. Rochelle also needs to whip cream to decorate the crown.
I'm just thinking I wish I'd married an American soldier, then I'd be in America with a whisk, an electric whisk.
The lack of a fridge is also proving problematic in creating the crown's arches.
Despite the fact that it is on a marble surface, the marge is really melted. So, considering I'm making pastry, I'm not sure how great this will be. Oh, that's terrible. That's just terrible. It's just, look at it. I don't think the Queen would want to look at this. I don't think it's a sort of crown she'd want to wear.
With Rochelle making a royal mess in the kitchen, the rest of the family are in party mood.
Well,
Like that.
really needs a good old clonk with something, doesn't it?
Clonk with your head.
I think that you might find that that's the American accent. I think if the Queen could see this now, she'd be delighted.
I know that it is a holiday, but it doesn't feel like a holiday for me. So I'm still in the kitchen, and I've been on my feet all day. So it feels like the same sort of day, except I'm making slightly different things. Oh. It's burnt on one side. I left it in for too long and the heat was hot. And the little medallion on the top is now, of course, stuck to it.
But at least she's had the help of modern technology for that jelly.
So that's it. It's a bit wobbly.
It is very wobbly, isn't it? What shall I do? Shall I tip it out now?
Yeah, because it's hot in here.
Yeah,
and get hotter.
Oh. It's not a crown, it's a beret. Oh. Shall we finish it off with this?
Oh, it's that.
This is the biscuit.
So this is supposed to look like that, right?
Yeah.
It's the same.
Look at that. Oh, there's absolutely nothing you can do with that, is there? There's nothing. So it says, just follow the instructions and success is yours. It's easy to make. Well, it's obviously a lie, isn't it?
Wow, look at this, Fred. This is what a television set used to look like in the 1950s.
While only 5% of British homes had invested in a fridge by 1953, almost 20% had found the money to buy a TV set.
We've made a click, but nothing's happening. Oh, there we are.
There we go.
I know it's only the test card, but I think it's not a bad picture. Well, I love the idea of clustering around that and actually watching our noble Queen. I think that'll be really, really fascinating.
The crowning glory is finally finished just in time for the guests. Women from a local community centre who were all housewives in the 1950s.
Oh, wonderful. This is wonderful.
Oh, larder. Oh, we have one just like this. Cake tins, lemons, everything. Cereal. Oh, you've got it all. It's really wonderful.
I found it really difficult.
Yes.
Because with the restriction of food that is available...
Didn't have enough stuff, did you?
No, no.
Because you had to make do with what there was available.
But did you think that was good? Did you, or did you know that it should have been better?
You accepted that.
Right.
I mean, I was you accepted these things.
Now comes the stagecoach carrying Her Majesty.
Nearly 3/4 of the population watched the coronation on television.
Oh, look.
Doesn't she look lovely?
She looks very kind of small and young.
She was.
The weight of that crown must have been so heavy on her head. How does it not fall off?
I expect she has to keep her head very, very still.
Well, she's certainly done long service for the country.
Give it to Fred.
It was sort of nice to be with other people because a lot of the time I've been on my own, so actually having other people to talk to has been really, really nice. And I can imagine that people would really look forward to events like the coronation because it would just take them out of this rather mundane kind of existence.
Leaning on a lamb, maybe you think I look a tramp.
The pit of my day was my dad playing the ukulele because it's just embarrassing. That's really embarrassing.
Oh my, I hope the little lady comes by. I'm leaning on a lamp at the corner of the street in case a certain little lady comes by. It's a brand new feeling.
1954 brings the best possible news for British families. With food supplies increasing, rationing is finally over.
Queues are about to become a memory. Meat, the last food on ration, has been freed after 14 years. You can buy enough to satisfy the most demanding appetite.
To celebrate, I've given them some end-of-rationing goodies.
I'm smiling. Look at
So am I.
Oh, do you know I've got goosebumps?
No wonder.
How bizarre is that? I've got goosebumps.
Fresh eggs.
Eggs.
And proper bread.
Wow.
And what's
I think
this?
It's bacon.
Sweets are off ration. Yes! Yes! You know, as many sweets as I want, and my mum can't stop me!
This morning, Rochelle's making a food survey breakfast, served by a 45-year-old housewife from the West Midlands to her husband and 2 teenagers on the 15th of October 1954.
Eggs, bacon, white bread, tea, milk and sugar.
I'm actually Jewish. I don't normally do bacon and eggs, but I do actually feel like eating this.
With white bread now widely available, in the space of 4 months, sales of brown fell to almost zero.
It's lovely. Spread is just so much nicer. You could just keep eating it. You wouldn't feel you'd had enough after half a slice. It feels extravagant, doesn't it? It just feels like there's just plenty and we can have as much as we want.
This is the first meal that's actually been tasty.
This is a proper, and it's tasty.
That's because it's like normal. We would modern food. I feel like the world is kind of in two different colours. When it was ration, it was all quite dark. And now it just seems sunny.
That was just a fantastic breakfast, Rochelle. Thank you.
It's the first time you've thanked me for anything.
Well, I must say, I think it's the best meal we've had so far.
That's a sick car.
Oh my!
What do you think?
It's rather nice, isn't it?
To celebrate the end of austerity, the family's going on a picnic. Car ownership was just taking off, although there were only 2.5 million cars on the road, compared to 32 million today.
Slow down. You can't tell someone to slow down at 20 miles an hour.
Slow down.
Why?
Because Dad, you're a terrible driver.
I'm not. This is a nice spot. These look like very good sarnies.
That's the corned beef ones.
OK, nice. Oh, it's fantastic. The end of rationing. Honestly, I feel like somebody's opened a door and there's a kind of bright, sunlit world beyond it. It's wonderful. I think that really suits you, Hyde. Oh.
I'm so happy because for the past 3 years I haven't actually really eaten anything, and now I just can eat stuff that I want to eat and all the chocolate and sweets and all that stuff.
After the last couple of days of just being enclosed, it's really beautiful to be out in the open air. It's almost as if I can breathe, actually, and my hands haven't smelt of dripping for sort of 24 hours, which is just really nice.
Although rationing had ended, food remained expensive, but change was afoot. A transformation in farming that would start to bring the cost of food down.
Old hedges are bulldozed out of the way, for the small fields of our grandfathers are uneconomical on the large modern farm.
Determined Britain should never face the shortages of wartime again, the government launched a range of incentives to increase agricultural production. Farmers raced to invest in modern equipment, new pesticides and fertilisers, and wheat yields increased by nearly 50% across the decade. It was the start of a total transformation in the way food was produced. In 1955, a brand new product utilising the very latest manufacturing techniques hit the shelves: the frozen fish finger. I've come to Billingsgate Fish Market to meet Peter Hadjipieris from Birdseye to find out how the chance discovery of fast freezing changed British eating habits forever.
The story is that Clarence Birdseye, who was the inventor of the whole process, was a scientist.
He was a real person.
He was a real
Was
person.
he a captain?
He wasn't a captain.
He wasn't in the Navy at all?
No, he wasn't.
He's not like Captain Birdseye.
No. He was a scientist, very keen on exploration, and he was in Canada on a fishing expedition. He left some fish, went back, and realised that the sub-zero temperature was immediately freezing the fish. What surprised him, actually, was when he got back, defrosted the fish, and it tasted just the same as the fish in the fresh form. What he then tried to do is replicate that back in the lab. He was in labs for years experimenting, until one day he invented something called the plate freezer. He patented it, and there was born the fish finger.
And thus, a tea time legend was created.
To convert cod into appetizing fish fingers takes no time at all. No sooner shaped than fried.
Fish fingers were produced at the biggest quick-freezing factory outside America, in Great Yarmouth, and they flew off the shelves, selling 600 tons in the first year. Is it a bit surprising that the fish finger caught on in homes that didn't have freezers?
Well, I don't think it is surprising. This is one of the first great convenience foods. It was healthy, nutritious, great fun for the kids. And of course, in those days, they had the slogan when they launched that was no bones, no smell, no waste, no fuss. And the convenience factor was very attractive for housewives in those days, and hence why it succeeded.
I've sent the Robshaws their first taste of the convenience food revolution.
Wow. Yeah, it's really nice. The product is very convenient. I heat it up and that is it. Nothing to do, nothing else to do. It's fantastic.
By 1956, the average wage had nearly doubled since the start of the decade, to over £11 a week. Many Brits had disposable income for the first time ever. Britain was riding the crest of an economic wave.
Cleaner and more efficient than gas. It's electric. Now there's no need to wait to purchase your new electric cooker. Ask for hire purchase. Talk to one of our representatives at your local showroom today.
Domestic appliances were hugely expensive, but the recent lifting of restrictions on hire purchase put them within easy reach of the masses. Consumer culture was born, as newfangled electrical goods were snapped up on credit.
Mrs. Harrison, what have you bought on HP?
Oh, there's the mixer, the fridge, the washing machine, the dishwasher, and the polisher.
Why do you keep buying all these things?
Well, I know I shouldn't really say this, but I like to see all the envious looks of my friends.
Manufacturers used a variety of techniques to sell these shiny devices, particularly saleswomen who could extol their virtues.
The only bending down cleaning job, the bottom, the top of the oven.
I've sent the Robshaws to meet a familiar face who worked as a demonstrator in the 1950s.
Mary Berry! Oh, how lovely, lovely to see you. Fantastic.
I worked for the Electricity Board in the 1950s, and I really loved my job because I was trained in domestic science, but I had to learn the technical side. And a technician would go out and put this in a village hall with a table, and I would arrive and do the demonstration. And it was really such fun. I would be telling people all about the virtues of modern electric cooking. The electric oven in the 50s was revolutionary.
With the development of the national grid, 86% of households were wired for electricity. It was promoted as a clean, efficient alternative to dirty coal gas cookers.
It's nice, isn't it, don't you think?
It's lovely. It does look very beautiful, doesn't it?
People would say, oh, I could never afford that. And you would say, but you could have it on hire purchase, and it would only cost you £10 a week. And then they'd sort of get interested. The hire purchase was absolutely new then, and you know, people thought it was sort of sent from heaven.
One of Mary's demonstration techniques was to make a Victoria sandwich, the benchmark of perfect 1950s baking.
So we've got 8 ounces of butter in here, then 8 ounces of sugar goes in, and you would cream it together. And in the past, people would have done it with a wooden spoon, and that took a long time. But we had these wonderful mixers. And if I was in the showroom doing a demonstration, people would walk by and you'd see through the glass it rising. People thought it was magical. Does that look good?
Wow.
So in goes the cream. And that is the classic Victoria sandwich.
It's so light, it just feels like it's made of a cloud or something.
So are you tempted to buy an electric cooker?
I'm not just tempted, I'm sold on it. I want one.
Oh,
I want
good.
2.
Oh, that's good.
Ka-ching! That's another sale for Mary.
I think the oven will transform my life simply because it does look so new. It's better than the functional oven that I've got at the minute that looks like a furnace.
Well, look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that.
In 1957, Prime Minister Harold Macmillan declared that most people have never had it so good, and women across the country were falling for the latest must-have kitchen gadgets.
Hello? The Cambridge chef is a piece of magic, really. You know, this is every woman's best friend and is going to save many, many hours of her labour because it was so versatile. It could beat your eggs, make cakes, knead dough, chop up vegetables, liquidise soup.
Appliances like the mixer were marketed to women with idealised images of the home. With new labour-saving devices, cooking was no longer a chore, but something for housewives to celebrate and take pride in.
It's got this futuristic American design. So it's promising something about the future rather than looking back to the past. It's not like your mangle, which looks like an instrument of torture.
Yes.
This looks like an instrument of pleasure.
Right. You know, for me, coming from early 50s to having one of these would be the most extraordinary thing to have.
One of the ways they sold it was by saying the reason that American women look so young is because they have food processors.
Rochelle's got the gadgets, now she faces the ultimate test for the perfect 50s housewife. Brandon's boss is coming for dinner. She's attempting a 3-course meal, including soufflé and an apple and orange tart from the most popular cookbook of the day. Cordon Bleu Bible, the Constant Spry cookery book.
Turn half of this mixture into buttered souffle and break the 4 eggs carefully into the 4 little nests.
There are 15 different steps to the dessert alone.
I'm feeling immense pressure. It's just having to do all of it in one go. There's too much to do.
Remaining true to his 50s role, Brandon's staying out of the kitchen and building a bookcase.
With the boss coming for dinner, I put a lot on Rochelle and she'll have to rise to the challenge.
In the kitchen, there's still the main course of beef stroganoff to prepare.
Cut the meat. Cut the meat. Cut the meat.
Are you going mad?
Yes, cut the meat.
Hello, Mr. Student.
I think my mum in the kitchen's going a bit deranged. She's laughing for long periods of time. She's repeating the same things over and over again. It's the classic signs of insanity.
Rochelle is discovering that the idealised vision of the modern housewife, aided by her new gadgets, isn't all it's cracked up to be.
I'm working harder with the devices because I've given myself that much more to do. With this, it's like loads and loads of different preparations and different steps, and it's an extremely complicated procedure. And I can imagine there must be many women who might feel they are not reaching that level of perfection that is desired of them.
Under pressure to project an image of the perfect housewife, it's not just the food that's got to look good. As Brandon's boss Chris and his wife Jenny arrive.
Great to see you.
Lovely to meet you.
too.
Wow.
That looks delicious.
So these are soufflés?
Yes.
Well, this looks incredible.
That was good, wasn't it?
It's lovely.
Oh, it's very good.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a machine one day in the future that did the dishes?
Oh, that's just science fiction, darling.
That looks really good.
This is an apple and orange tart with a sabayon sauce.
It just shows how much eating habits changed in just 8 years, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because that sort of thing just wouldn't have been conceivable in 1950, 1951. I mean, you wouldn't have had the ingredients anyway.
I think it's absolutely delicious. It's really light.
I'm going to collapse with my legs up in the air. I'm really pleased. That really seemed to work. I think Brandon's boss was genuinely impressed. He might give me a job. He might.
I think Rochelle played a blinder. I think it was a fantastic menu, perfectly executed. You could see they were enjoying it. Rochelle came good when it mattered. She's had some struggles, but when the heat was on, she was equal to the occasion.
That's excellent.
So nice.
Really good.
The end of the decade has arrived. Polly and I are joining the Robshaws and their friends for celebratory cocktails to discover how the family have found the 1950s.
Tell I'm a real mixologist.
There's one family member who won't be sad to say goodbye to the period.
There's no iPad, there's no computer, there's no nice sweets. The list goes on.
Oh, cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Here's to the end of the 1950s.
Over the decade, they've eaten 24 meals, most of them unrecognisable to a 21st century family.
I've learned that, you know, I can actually live without snacks all the time, which is a bit of a shock to me.
Generally, the food didn't have as much flavour and it was all quite heavy, but it probably was quite healthy because we didn't eat much sugar.
One of them is the celery farci.
Wow.
Although I didn't particularly rave about all of the food, it is healthy food. At the end of the week, I must say I'm feeling quite good.
That was the food, but what about the impact on family life? In contrast to their 21st century roles, Rochelle's been in sole charge of the kitchen, cooking all meals from scratch, shopping every day, and doing 75 hours of housework.
There are elements of being a 50s housewife that are appealing. It is nice to sort of create a meal and put it on the table. But I've missed Brandon's support, and the isolation between me and Brandon makes me feel quite lonely.
Rochelle in the kitchen all the time, and us most of the time eating separately. I feel that we've lost something there, and I feel for this week I've sort of lost a friend.
I'm not at all surprised that a family as modern and emancipated as the Robshaws are delighted to leave the 50s behind. I had looked at it previously. I thought, through rose-tinted spectacles, I thought the 50s was maybe some glorious traditional time of family and everyone being together after the war. But clearly you can see from Rochelle, she's visibly ground down by it. No respite from the grimness of life apart from sleep. Brandon also clearly doesn't like not being allowed into the kitchen. He feels cut off from his family. So from the experience of the Robshaws, it seems that the family was quite a fractured thing in the 1950s.
Older friends have said life is better in the 50s, and they're obviously lying. It's obviously not true. So I'm happy to leave the 50s behind. I want to move on. Oh my goodness me!
Next time, the Robshaws experience the swinging 60s.
Look at that!
Smells like dog food.
Have you seen them? Don't you think that is just exciting?
Oh, look! What's that dog doing there?